Hey church, we're going to continue walking through 2 Corinthians. Remember the big picture so far in 2 Corinthians 1 through 7 is that Paul is showing that he is a legitimate apostle commissioned by God himself. And we saw in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 that he is a minister of the new covenant, and that the Corinthians themselves are recipients of that new covenant as they have trusted in the gospel, as evidenced by the fact that their lives are being transformed. And in all of those ways, Paul is saying that his apostleship of being an apostle of the new covenant is legitimate. And he's continuing this train of thought. In verse 6, he said the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. We see that he's comparing and contrasting the Mosaic covenant. We see that in Exodus 19 through 24 with the new covenant in Jeremiah 31, Ezekiel 36. And it has been inaugurated through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And he compares and contrasts the new covenant and the Mosaic covenant here in verse 7 through 11. Now, if the ministry of death, what is the ministry of death? Well, it's the ministry that was carved in letters on stone, right? That bringing up that imagery from Exodus 19, when God himself wrote on the tablets of stone. This covenant came with glory. It was glorious. It was instituted by God himself. Galatians, right? It's full of glory, so much so that the Israelites could not even gaze at Moses' face because of its glory. And yet, we see that it was being brought to an end. We'll see that idea of this covenant being brought to an end several times here in Corinthians, right? Will not the ministry, he's comparing, will not the ministry of the Spirit have even more glory? For if there was glory in the ministry of condemnation, the ministry of righteousness must far exceed it. Indeed, in this case, what once had glory has come to have no glory at all because of the glory that surpasses it. Now, if what was being brought to an end came with much glory, much more will what is permanent have glory. Look at these statements here. The Mosaic covenant that came with glory was being brought to an end. It's come to have no glory at all. It was being brought to an end. And the new covenant is even more glorious. It exceeds it in glory, and it is permanent. So what Paul is saying here is that the Mosaic covenant was not able to transform the inner person. The problem was sin. The problem is the human heart. And the new covenant promises that God will take the heart of stone out and give them a heart of flesh. He will write the law of God on their hearts, and it would transform the inner person so that they would have a desire and ability to follow God, to obey God, and it's permanent. It was been established by Jesus Christ. Paul is saying here in the larger argument that he is a minister of this new covenant, and this is evidenced in the fact that their lives have been transformed as they have trusted in the gospel. I just want to say a brief word here. Even though Paul is saying that the Mosaic covenant has been brought to an end and its glory has been brought to an end, we need to keep in mind passages like 2 Timothy 3:16, which says all of Scripture, even those passages in Exodus 19 to 24, is God-breathed, profitable for instruction and reproof and training in righteousness, that the man of God would be equipped for every good work. Right? Jesus said he has not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. So we need to read all of the Bible, even the Old Testament, as beneficial for the Christian life, and we need to keep in mind the historical redemptive shift that has happened. Christians are no longer under the Mosaic covenant, but under the new covenant. But that doesn't mean we need to throw out the Old Testament as if it has no relevance or bearing on our life today. What it means is that we should read the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, through the lens of Christ and apply it in its historical redemptive Christ as we read all of Scripture together as one unified story about the gospel of Jesus Christ and how we can be engrafted into that covenant, which is permanent through faith in Jesus Christ. So I would just encourage us to be reminded of the glorious nature of the new covenant that Jesus has inaugurated and the covenant that we get to be a part of through faith in Jesus Christ.